Performance comes only when you have the discipline, only when you have the control over yourself. You cannot expect that the performance to go up all of a sudden. Action-oriented process, please underline this word. Why? Because the very purpose of control is defeated if corrective action is not taken for improvement. Control here comes in and says that it is not just about revisiting, but it is about correcting where you have gone wrong, or rather it is about improvising the steps so that you can perform better. Good morning and welcome to the second session in Unit 5 in Management Principles and Practices, where we are going to talk about a very powerful topic called as controlling. Now, let's just move forward and try to understand the meaning of controlling. Now, the word control itself sounds negative to most of us. It's something like I'm trying to hold you back from doing an activity or from doing an action. But in the context of managerial planning, in the context of management, controlling is all about laying down the do's and don'ts. We are not here to control, but we are here to guide you. We are here to tell you what exactly needs to be done at a given point of situation. Now, let's look at here. When I'm going to lay down the objectives, a proper organization structure is designed. People are being assigned with tasks and they are directed to perform their respective job. The actual performance is assessed from time to time to understand what have we achieved, and that's exactly where controlling function comes. What are we trying to do here is that I am trying to put in certain benchmarks, certain lines where I want to see that the employees are performing as expected by the organization. Sometime down the lane, I always want you to understand this factor very clearly. Performance comes only when you have the discipline, only when you have the control over yourself. You cannot expect that the performance to go up all of a sudden. You cannot expect that performance comes out of the sky, out of the blue, just like that. It comes when you are disciplined. It comes when you try to understand that I have to play within my limits. So the management always understands this factor. They come upon the thought process saying that every employee inside the organization should be given certain rules, should be given certain regulation, basically a play area within the boundaries that he needs to play, and he has to come out with the appropriate results. So in the controlling factor, it's a function of management which refers to the evaluation of actual performance against the plan or standard performance. Now, for everything in this world, there is a benchmark, there is a standard, there is a value. Now, for that benchmark or for the standard, we always try to pit ourselves against it. We want to challenge the standards. We want to create our own records. We want to rewrite history. So it's always that management wants to have a check upon the actual versus that has been expected. So the question of actual versus expected comes with a lot of control. It doesn't come with a freelance approach here. It doesn't come with a thought process that yes, I can just walk in, I can perform, and I can achieve the results. You need to do it with certain rules and regulation. You need to achieve it with certain amount of thought process coming into picture. So that's why I would always say that you have to be very careful in terms of taking that corrective action. You have to understand that according to Henry Fayol, what he typically says is that control consists of verifying everything that occurs in conformation to the plan that is being spoken about. So you cannot just go ahead and say that there is some plan which is kept in mind, but I will go according to me, I will achieve the goal. No, it is according to the plan. It is according to the procedure. It is according to the thought process the management wants you to perform. So I always say that when the instructions are being issued to you, please follow the instructions. By following rules, people might call you lame. But by following rules, you are never going to be affected. By following rules, you might not be that topmost performer. By following rules, you might be going down at a space of a turtle. But then, by following rules, please understand that you are definitely going to succeed because you are not trying to deviate from the management thought process. So I would always say that control is not a negative function. It is a checkpoint that will try to make you understand whether you are doing good or whether you are not achieving the targets, whether you are on track or are you deviated from the track altogether. So that's why controlling is very, very important in management. Moving forward, according to Bridge, the control factor is about checking the current performance, and it is more about the standard factors that we have told across. Also, recording the experience gained from working. Now, he tries to modify this control factor slightly. He tries to tell very clearly here that when we are talking about that controlling factor, when we are trying to talk about the factors of guidance altogether, what is that we are expecting? We are expected to share our experience. This is very, very important that I would always say. Share your experience. Why? Because your experience is valuable to somebody else. Your thought process would definitely enlighten somebody's ideology of how to take things forward. Somewhere down the lane, you might be asking yourself this question: how is that the factors of performance going to affect somebody else? But believe me, management says that whenever you are performing something, whenever you are trying to achieve something, that becomes a lesson for others. That becomes a thought process for others to follow. So, moment you try to make yourself an example for others, people love to follow you as an example, not just because you have achieved success, but because you have followed the rules and regulations, but because you have gone through the system, through the process completely, and you have been able to achieve what the management wants. So that's why when Brecht talks about this controlling factor, he says that it is more about sharing the experience that also comes in, which actually becomes a guide for others to achieve the future standards. Now, the next thing, planning and controlling, when I'm going to look into these two factors, they are closely related and they depend upon each other. No doubt about it. Why? Because controlling depends on planning, and planning provides you that targets under which the actual performance is planned or guided altogether. Now, when you plan something, you plan with an ideology, with a vision, with a thought process, with a target in mind. That's where planning actually comes in. Now, even for an example, when I say that I'm going to plan for my final examination, when I put the timetable, I say 5 hours for a particular subject, 6 hours for another subject, 10 hours for another subject. So what I do is that I plan with a deadline in my mind. I don't plan just like that. So what planning does is that it lays a foundation for the control factor. The control factor comes in and checks whether you are able to achieve what you have planned. So when you are able to achieve what you have planned, automatically you become a champion. Why? Because now you are able to understand that you are in sync with what you are doing. So if you have planned it accordingly and you are able to perform as per the standards given, then automatically the control function is inbuilt inside you. You don't have to worry about it. You're already there and you will achieve it as per the need, as per the factors altogether. So that's why I would always say that controlling is all about putting yourself together, trying to understand how to take things forward. So this is very, very important. So once you have planned, take it forward in the way it has to be. So that's why I say controlling involves the nature, the quantum, the time framework. This is very important. You need to understand what is the framework, what is the time factor, how it needs to be done, where it needs to be done, what are all the different factors, different criteria to be put together. Now, when you compare with the plan, you should see that where exactly the performance has been able to go forward. You should see that if there are any deviations that you are seeing, followed by, you should also take any corrective steps if there are some steps needed to be taken. If there are some factors that needs to be correct, some methods that needs to be correct, this is the opportunity for you. Why? Because many times people feel that the first time if I have done something, that is enough. Whether it is right or wrong is not my question. I have completed a task that has been given by my manager. Why should I again go back, have a relook into it, again start talking about that, again start rebuilding the process altogether? But the question of control here comes in and says that it is not just about revisiting, but it is about correcting where you have gone wrong, or rather it is about improvising the steps so that you can perform better. So that's why when you take those corrective steps according to control, you are actually trying to rebuild that situation, suggesting revision of plans if necessary. After going through the flow, going through the process, there might be a time where you want to come back and say that, yes, the plan could have been redevised in this manner. The plan could have been adjusted accordingly. The plan could have been improvised in this manner. So that's where controlling gives you that hindsight factor. It tells you where exactly have we gone wrong. Again, when I use that word wrong, it is not on the negative factor. It is about the point that we could have done better. So when you follow certain steps in controlling, you are actually trying to make yourself better. You are trying to improvise on the process. You are trying to deviate. You are trying to go forward, understand what are the nuances in this entire setup. Followed by the characteristics of controlling. What is the characteristics of controlling that we are going to look forward? The first one, planning is the basis of control. No doubt about it. Why? Because control is said to be checking performance as per what we have planned. And so planning precedes controlling and sets the standard. So it is first planning that comes into action. Planning will set right all the standards. It will tell starting from point 1 to point 10, what are all the steps that needs to be followed, how we need to do it, where we need to improve ourselves, where we need to position ourselves better. So that's why I would always say that planning precedes controlling. Planning gives you the idea how to do things better. Followed by characteristics of controlling. Now, characteristics of controlling means it is a continuous process. That's very, very important. So planning is not something, the controlling factor of planning is not something which is very, very easy, just like that on a one instance. It's more about a flow. It is more about a continuous process altogether. So it's an ongoing, it's a dynamic function of management. It involves continuous review of performance, and it is not a one-time exercise. Many people find that once I have learned some technique or talent, that's it. I don't have to work on it. I don't have to improvise on it. I just have to do that. I keep on doing the job monotonously without questioning myself, without having a feedback, or without on the process of even the thought that I would be able to do it better. Why is this? Because in management, we believe that once you have learned something, then that skill is not something great. We just forget it. But in control factor, we come back and say that there is always a chance for you to improve. There's always an opportunity given to you to showcase yourself better than what you were yesterday. So controlling is not something that just happens once in a while or one-time activity. It is a dynamic activity. It is a continuous activity. It keeps flowing through the organization. You need to understand that the amount of work that has been given to you, it has got control factors at each and every level. So you might be a CEO, you might be a manager, you might be a supervisor, or you might be a shop floor person working. But then at every level, there are some control factors. You need to follow it. You need to check on a regular basis. Am I doing the job as per the need? Followed by control is all pervasive, which means to say that control is exercised at all levels of management. That's where I was trying to say that it is functional area of attached to every single department. It is a core process. You cannot say that control is only for finance, control is only for marketing or for HR. Control is for everybody who involves as a part of the organization. So you cannot go back and say that control was only given to that person, control is only for this person. Control is something which is going to stay there in the organization right from the top to the bottom. Second thing, action is the essence of control. Control is an action-oriented process. Please underline this word. Why? Because the very purpose of control is defeated if corrective action is not taken for improvement. Now, in most of the organizations, you might have heard about health and environment safety plan, or you might have heard about certain policies which they are very strict about. So, moment there is going to be a deviation on the policy or standards, if the organization does not take a corrective stand about it, then the very purpose of control is defeated. Now, for example, many organizations practice the act of diversity. They practice the act of non-discrimination against the caste, creed, gender, and other factors. But if you start finding that people are going against this policy and trying to create a disturbance in the work environment, that means the control factors have to come back strongly and make the people understand that if you deviate from the norms, there is always a check on you. So that's why I say that the control factors are something which is highly action oriented. It happens on the spot. It needs to come back. It needs to make the employee feel that in case of deviation, there will be always a corrective action taken against in order to make people understand not to deviate. Now, every time this corrective action is to make you better. It is not to point a finger at you and tell that you are doing something wrong. It is basically a corrective action so that you improvise on your performance. Followed by control is forward-looking. Definitely, yes. Why? Because it is futuristic in nature. Nobody wants to talk about yesterday and today. Everybody wants to talk about tomorrow. Everybody wants to see that where will I be tomorrow? Will I be a manager? Will I be a vice president? Will I become a CEO, CTO, CFO, whatever is that? But I am a forward-looking person. I want to see that 10 years down the lane, 20 years down the lane, where do I stand? In that context, in that scenario, I would always like to ask you, have you ensured in terms of taking the control factors with you? Because to grow inside an organization, you need to have controlled set of actions. You cannot just grow because you think that you have the ability. You need to follow rules. You need to help others. You need to cooperate with departments. You need to be a part of the organization that understands, and then only you can also set part to the growth factor. So when I say this forward looking, it is something where you have to take it as a part of your growth plan, and every single action, every performance of yours will be guided, will be checked according to the control factors. Based on that, only the control function is actually looked upon. So that's why I say control is a forward looking function. It is not on to the reverse. It is not about yesterday. It is about tomorrow. So the very next day, when you're going to talk about controlling factor, when you're going to talk about your performance, this factor is inbuilt. So with this, I come to the end of today's session. I hope and believe that all the factors that have been discussed through this presentation will be of a great value and great resource to you, both in terms of practical as well as in theory. In the upcoming sessions, we will be talking more about the factors of controlling and the other dimensions of it. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.